Hello there and welcome to the Agents Together Bounce Back from Redundancy webinar. This is the third one in this series that we have done, and this time I've gathered even more experts to help us with some of the burning questions that are on your mind if you've been made redundant, or indeed if you are in the job market and looking for work in a state agency right now. So I'd like to say a huge collaborative thank you to the wonderful experts. They're all going to introduce themselves in just a moment. But first of all, just very quickly, we're here today. If you're watching this live, fantastic, and thank you for joining us live. If you're watching this on recording, today is the 4th of November. My goodness, so much has changed in a week since we did the last one. We've obviously got a lockdown happening tomorrow, or of sorts lockdown. I know we're trying to avoid using that phrase. And we've got all kinds of things and rumours swirling around about things like perhaps new furlough schemes, etc., etc. So everything's changed, but the fundamentals of what we're going to talk about today don't, and many of you have already submitted questions to us and to the experts to get some real answers from people who are really in the know. So thank you to everybody also who has submitted questions ahead of time. If you want to submit any other questions, there is a chat box and you can just pop them in there and we will get to them undoubtedly. So thank you again, and I'm going to call out your names because it makes life a lot easier and a lot more in control. So perhaps we can start today with Mike Day, as you are a new face definitely on here. Mike, could you just introduce yourself for everybody and just tell everybody what you do, please?
Certainly. Mike Day, lovely to be here. I'm one of the founder members of Agents Together. 45 years in residential property. I started when I was 3. Also a director of a business called TechLet. Basically, I'm a business mentor and consultant. I have around 900 estate agency and conveyancing clients, and I provide a range of training, consultancy, strategic, operational bits and pieces, and also a lot of copywriting and press bits and pieces. So been around the block, got more letters after my name than in it, and delighted to be here.
Great. A very busy man, Mike, but supremely organised. That's one of the things which I note all the time. Thank you, Mike. Josh, maybe you could fire away next.
Yeah, so Josh Rayner, first of all, thanks for having me. I own a company called Rayner Personnel. We are a recruitment company that specialises in the property sector.
Fantastic, thank you. And Nicola?
My name is Nicola. I own Broomham Recruitment, also a recruiter in the property sector. And my background's lettings, whole family full of estate agents. So hopefully I can provide a little bit of value for you guys today.
I bet that makes Christmas dinner exciting. The whole family of estate agents.
My sister, my brother-in-law, and my mum, and my husband.
And your husband. Yeah, I was going to say, don't forget
him. Forgot him.
We won't tell him. We won't tell him. That's brilliant. Thank you. Jacqueline, another new face here for Agents Together. Hi.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm delighted to be here. Yeah, my name's Jacqueline, but feel free to call me Jackie. I am an employment law solicitor. I have been qualified now for 20 years, so I've been doing it for quite some time. I don't think I have quite as many letters after my name as Mike. But we can always debate it hereafter.
Brilliant. I mean, we could just start a competition or something, although Mike is well out in the lead, certainly from me anyway. Excellent. Brilliant. Okay, Russell?
Yeah, my name is Russell Humphrey. I'm the owner of the Humphrey Group. Bottom line is I'm really passionate about the property industry. Spent 20 years up to a senior level within property. Just because I've left the industry, I'm still involved in a day-to-day basis and just want to help people make the right choices for their career. So yeah, delighted to be here. So thank you for asking me.
Great, we're delighted to have you. Thank you very much. Stuart.
Hi everyone, I'm Stuart Perkins and I'm head of people at Boomin. Before that I worked at Purple Bricks for a couple of years. Most of my career has been in recruitment and more latterly in HR. I have been made redundant in the past, so I can maybe share some of my experiences and hopefully keep everything really positive for everybody. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Iain White.
Afternoon. Thank you for having me on your fabulous webinar. So yes, my name is Iain White. I'm a career estate agent, not quite as long as Michael, as we debated yesterday, but about 30 odd years, I think. And currently, I'm a co-owner of Crux Careers, which is a property recruitment business.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Well, I just again want to thank you all, because, you know, there are many of us, as has happened with Agents Together, end up being, you know, ultimately the competition, but we're coming together to help the industry, and that is the most fantastic thing about this. So thank you very much for joining together to do this. It's absolutely brilliant. So as I mentioned, we find ourselves in a very unusual situation this week, in terms of the fact that last week we were looking like we were potentially going to keep going, and we were going to have the end of the job retention scheme and various furlough packages. I'm absolutely not an expert in those, so I'm not going to for 1 minute start to delve in too deep into that. Jacqueline will definitely tell me off, but I will make a few acknowledgements to it as we go through. The thing though, and the reason why we put on these webinars and we wanted to help the industry in this way, was because ultimately, and I'll have to refer to my notes from time to time because I want to get these numbers right, unemployment at the moment is at a 3-year high. And I've mentioned it the last few webinars that in August alone, 227,000 people were made redundant. And these are, whilst not necessarily the numbers definitely felt in a state agency right now, it's certainly it's affecting all of us, and we want to make sure that those people that have been made redundant in a state agency or are worried have got the tools and the things that they need at their fingertips. So that is absolutely why we did it. I did see that there were 2 million people still on furlough as of last week, which is a huge number again. And there's potentially, the Bank of England are predicting we're going to see up to 7.5% unemployment by the spring, which is actually, you know, we're looking at 2.6 million people in the UK. Now, the good news is it isn't all doom and gloom, because actually I before I came on this webinar, as part of my research, I headed over to Indeed and I typed in estate agent into Indeed. I'm not looking for a job, by the way, just in case anybody was wondering. It was purely for research. And there were 2,700 and something jobs on there, which is great news. That there are jobs out there, and I don't think that anybody should just go in and be quite so broad brush about their approach to it. And you can speak to any of these wonderful people if you're looking for a job. But ultimately there is hope and there are jobs, and that's what I took from that. So whilst we could quite easily get wrapped up in some of those big headline numbers about that look a bit doom and gloom, there is hope, there are jobs. Just any of you that are running recruitment businesses at the moment, have you got a lot of jobs available, or what can you, any of you give me a feel? I don't know, Iain, do you want to give me a feel for what's going on?
Yeah, generally speaking, there is no shortage of vacancies.
Okay.
And the redundancies at the moment are probably not within the estate agency sector. So the candidates are coming from out of the sector into estate agency. Okay. I mean, that's not exclusive, but generally speaking. So absolutely no shortage of vacancies, different types of vacancies coming up where agencies have reimagined their business a little bit because of COVID and new ways of doing things. But definitely not a lack of opportunity.
Okay, that's good. Nicola, are you finding the same sort of thing?
Mixed bag, I would say. I know that we've had probably 15% of our roles pulled in the last couple of days. And of the ones that have been pulled, they have been pulled because they are probably single or up to sort of 5 branch estate agents that are just waiting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. They haven't necessarily completely said we're not going to hire, but they've said, let's just hold fire for the moment and just see what happens. I think that at the moment, agents are split into 2 categories, one being the let's go gung-ho and just carry on like normal, and agents saying sort of, well, let's just step back a little bit and just see what happens over the next couple of weeks and not be that bold, brash agent going, we're still open, use us. So I think for us, because of the type of clients that we work with, we've got quite a few that are just being a little bit more cautious. So there are still roles, just I would say not as many.
Okay, and I think that's probably a a summary that we would probably all expect. I think in the situation that we find ourselves in, the word that has been used, probably overused, unbelievably this year, is uncertainty. And I think what's happened is, given the news that was on Saturday of the fact that on tomorrow, Thursday, we are going to come under tighter restrictions generally, I just think there is uncertainty. There's uncertainty in home movers, in consumer confidence, in me, in you guys, in everybody's just a little bit uncertain. And it all varies in, you know, there's lots of variations on that and different degrees of that, but fundamentally we're all just a little bit more apprehensive and wondering, you know, where does this take us next? What happens next? What's going to happen at Christmas? All those sorts of things. So it's interesting times for sure, but we are here to answer those questions and answer some of the questions that can help people get back into the market. So I've got a whole big list. I've even printed it out like in the old-fashioned days of questions that people have submitted. So as part of our session today, I'm just going to fire away with those questions. If we get any live, I'll make sure that I ask those too. But I'm going to start. With and this one was, I will have to read. My apologies. Was from Jane, and so this is a big one. Like, I've always been intrigued by this, and Stuart, you said that you'd been made redundant before. Mike Day had done some research about, as part of our scheme that we're doing, this series that we're doing, and he found out that, I think it was it 37%, Mike?
No, it was around 50. I can't remember the exact figure, but it was around about 50% of people have been made redundant at some point in their career, and of those people, something like a further 15% or so that have been made redundant at least twice.
Okay.
So it is not unusual,
right?
You know, and I think, you know, the positive message that comes out of this is that, you know, it is one of those things, and it's how we react to it and how we go forward, and that's obviously what we'll explore as we go through the session.
Perfect. Well, that's great, because this question that Jane has sent in is, do employers see redundancy as a bad thing? So I don't know who wants to pick this up. And I'm looking at all your faces looking back at me. Stuart, you're currently hiring for, last time I checked, 100 people, 40 people? I can't remember. You have to remind me. But you're hiring.
No, we are hiring, absolutely. Yeah, we've got over 100 people now. We've probably got about another 20 odd vacancies, I think.
Right. Okay.
A lot around tech and sales. So I suppose, yeah, from my perspective, I think there was more of a stigma in the past, to be honest with you. I think because of all the stats you've just given and the research that Mike picked up as well, it's almost just, it's part of life, unfortunately, at the moment, over the last sort of 6 months or so. When I'm looking at candidate CVs and applications coming through, on the whole, we don't know, of course, because it doesn't necessarily say on the CV or the covering letter. The dates might be on there of employment, and the date might be a previous date, but I can be wholly honest with you and say, at the moment, because of the speed we're trying to hire people, that if actually somebody is immediately available for any reason, obviously if it's redundancy or an end of a contract, that's actually a really positive thing, because we can bring them through to interview more quickly, and if they're the right candidate, hire them. So as far as I'm concerned, there's no stigma at all. As Mike said, the numbers are so high these days. It's not an issue. Maybe in the past, when there was very little redundancy, people might have made an assumption that somebody had been let go because they weren't the strongest performer. But these days, whole teams, whole departments, whole companies are making redundancies, yeah. And that obviously is going to include all of the very good people too. So no issue at all.
Okay, that's really, really good to hear, and I can see a lot of our other experts are really, really nodding on this. Josh, do you see the same thing? Are you sort of, how are your clients, your hiring clients? Do they feel the same as Stuart?
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually it's the candidate that thinks that redundancy is probably a bigger issue than it actually is. Yeah. I'm in agreement with Stuart, really, whereby lots of employers, I see lots of CVs, and there is people who've been made redundant. It's not a bad thing. The job in that incident was made redundant, not the person. So a lot of employers who are hiring are not so fussed about that, and they just want the right people. And like Stuart said, if people can start quickly, that's a positive thing for employers.
Okay, great. I know the person who's going to be able to answer this next question that's come in, and it won't be me. So this question came in from Laura. Can I question my redundancy if I think it is unfair or not for real reasons? Now, I'm a bit light on detail there, but I am definitely going to start with Jacqueline because she is our legal person, can help us, give us some guidance on that. But Jacqueline, is it difficult to navigate redundancy? I don't know. We've not got any further details on Laura's case. So
yeah. So the thing to remember the most about whether you're challenging whether redundancy is unfair or not is that legally there are 4 ways a redundancy can be unfair, really. And 1, that's if it's not a genuine redundancy situation. 2, if you've been unfairly selected. 3, if you've not had meaningful consultation. And 4, if your employer hasn't looked for suitable alternative employment. Now, what I often see is that when we get to is this a genuine redundancy situation, what an employee wants to challenge is things like that they're never going to be able to make this work. You know, this new structure, it's all going to go wrong. They don't realise it. But what I would say to that is that's really the commercial decision for the company. From a legal perspective, they just need to show that your role has ceased or diminished, or there's no longer a requirement for your role. So I think when you are challenging that redundancy, it's about challenging it on those 4 reasons, as opposed to you concentrating perhaps on commercial decisions which you can't do an awful lot about.
Okay, so that's really interesting. I think redundancy gets emotions really running high as well, and I don't know about you all, but I certainly can imagine that it's very, I'm not saying this in all cases, by the way, but it's probably quite easy to think that it's completely unfair, and in some cases it will seem unfair, but you're right, Jacqueline, it's a commercial decision that the business had to make for whatever that reason is. We've seen much of it in a state agency in the last 6-7 months. But obviously we are in a situation where there could be issues, and I just want to make sure we've answered Laura's question really, which are real issues, which are real legitimate reasons as to concerns. Is there anything that you can do to make sure it's just those 4 points that somebody needs to make sure?
Yeah, usually I find that the biggest challenges with the redundancy is all about someone's selection for redundancy, because some people sit in very unique roles, whereas other people, lots of others do very similar roles. And then it comes down to, well, why are you selecting me? Okay. And then that's where we can come down to, can I challenge this unfairness? And if employers are being very subjective, so, I don't think she is particularly good at the job, then of course that's something you can challenge, because what employers have to do is be objective about that and, look at appraisals, look at etc. So yeah, so within those 4 points I gave you, there are lots of pointers as to why and how you can challenge that redundancy and the fairness of that redundancy, really.
Laura didn't ask this, but the point that triggered in my head, what's the first thing that, if you've sort of looked at that and you think, actually, this is genuine, taken the emotion out of it, I've taken a breath, I've stepped back, I've realised perhaps there is some unfairness here. What's the first thing that somebody should do, an employee should do?
Well, of course, what employers have to do is run a meaningful consultation exercise. So that's not just confirming a decision that's already made, that is consulting with you. And it's within those consultation sessions that you really should be raising and challenging the fairness of the decision. So that would be about utilising that consultation process.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's really, really helpful. Has anybody else got anything else to add on that, or are we going to be happy with the fact that Jacqueline has given us the legal answer, and hopefully all just get to answer much easier questions than that. Thank you, Jacqueline. Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. So the next person, this person wanted to remain anonymous, and they go into a bit more detail. So they were made redundant in March, so and felt very fortunate to be able to take some time off. Didn't have to go immediately back into work or try and job hunt in the middle of a lockdown. But now they have got a hole in their CV. They've got an interview lined up, and they're worried about how it looks, that they didn't, in their words, it looks like I wasn't bothered to go and get something when I could have. I decided to not work. So any thoughts on that? I don't know where I've got to with it. Russell, perhaps you could give me some thoughts. Have I asked that question in its fullness?
Yeah, absolutely. It's being honest. So if you're looking for a particular role, it's really important. It's really easy for me to say this, but jumping into the first role you've got available could be the wrong move long term. And when I say long term, probably over the next 1 to 5 years. So an employer should be looking at that, going, look, if someone hasn't taken a role, as long as it's explained at interview stage, I would deal with it head on, and be honest, and be honest about the search they've done, and if they've had interviews and the reasons possibly why they haven't taken a role, because I think an employer would rather someone be picky rather than just jump into the first opportunity. Okay,
Iain, what's your thoughts on that? Because I suppose it ties in a little bit with what Stuart was saying about there not really being a stigma anymore. So you could without, I'm not sure, you could sort of walk into an interview and say, look, yeah, I was made redundant. Yes, we had a global pandemic. I wanted to choose the right role. I'm quite fortunate. And here I am today because I think you're the right company. Iain, is that the right approach, or would you approach it differently?
I can only concur that honesty has got to be a better policy than making it up. I think if a employer has got a prejudice about a gap in your CV, it won't be as big a prejudice if they find out that you've told them an untruth. So if you're going to do risk versus reward, then honesty is always going to come out on top. But also just have your explanation, your real, genuine, honest explanation for the gap, ready to recite if asked. As long as you can tell people the reasons why, I think most people will be fine with it. So be honest and be ready to explain. Okay. Would be my guidance.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So the next question I've got is from Steve, and I'll just read it verbatim. There are rumours at my work of job cuts. What can I do to stop myself from being one of the people who might be considered for these? Nicola, I wondered if you could maybe help.
I think it depends. Well, going back to what Jacqueline was saying, and Josh touched on as well, it's not about the person that's going, it's about the role that's going. So I think it depends on it really depends on the circumstances. If that person's role is being made redundant, then it's very difficult for them to make sure that they're not the person doing that. However, what I would say is that ultimately you need to, if there are a number of people doing this role and they're only keeping a proportion of those, you've ultimately got to demonstrate that you're the best and therefore you shouldn't go. You need to demonstrate that you can provide value, that all of the things that role entails you can do, and you can do better than anybody else. But it depends on where you are. I mean, different companies work in different ways. And if you can demonstrate that you're looking at growth, will take on extra responsibility, can perhaps put your hand up to some alternative tasks as well, maybe show that you can be diverse in what you're able to do and not just pigeonholed into one specific role, then I think that would be a good thing to do. But I think, like I said, it depends on whether or not that specific role is being made redundant or not. And that's probably not what you wanted to hear, but it really does.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, I was about to come to you because you work with literally hundreds of estate agents all around the country, and these employers inside out, really. What is it? How can we stop this?
Well, I think we've heard from both Russell and Iain. They use the word honesty, and that's crucial. I was recently working with a client, and we were interviewing, and a guy had hidden a job role off of his CV. We happened to know that he'd left this company, gone somewhere else, and come back because the role didn't work out. But he didn't tell us about it. Once we questioned it, of course, he was on the back foot because he'd just not revealed it. Now, it wouldn't have been an issue, but it became an issue because he had hidden it from us. In terms of what can somebody do to stave off redundancy, well, I think that's very limited, because if the business is, being sold, if the business is closing, there could be all sorts of different things. So you're not going to be able to control that. And I think an awful lot of this is about putting yourself in a position to be resilient enough to deal with situations. And controlling, it's a phrase, control the controllables. I can't control what's happening with COVID. I can't control what's happening in the economy, but I can control how I react to it and how I put myself forward. If we're going to go down a road of ROPA and qualifications and things, maybe I should be using any downtime or even time whilst I'm in employment to try and improve myself and make myself the best I can be. I probably ultimately can't do anything about a decision if the company's closing my department or whatever, but it would put me in a better position either to be the one selected to stay if that was the scenario, or of course on some sort of onward move. So I think there is still an element on everybody in business. You don't join a company and hand your career into the company and say, please look after this for me. There is a responsibility on all of us to look after ourselves here as well. Now, we'd like the company to support us and everything else, but I think people have got to take a little bit of responsibility for their own actions and how they react, and indeed get ahead of the game on certain things. And I think that's an area where people could do a little more, possibly.
That's fantastic, Mike. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Jacqueline, yes.
Yeah, I totally agree with the panel. The only thing I was going to add to that is that obviously during consultation, and once again it will depend on the individual circumstances, but I've often seen during consultation an employee saying, well, what if I went to part-time working, or what if I went to shorter hours? Or, and the employer genuinely hadn't thought of that because they just naturally assumed that the individual would not want that. So sometimes, but of course that's going to depend on an individual circumstances, but that may be one way if that person wants to avoid it and can perhaps offer some alternatives that way, then it's worth looking at.
Yeah, that's absolutely really great advice. I mean, that consultation process is so important, isn't it? Because it does give you the opportunity as somebody who's going through it to potentially negotiate to some degree, not just like an exit deal, but actually, if I stay, perhaps we can look at it this way and it could work for everybody. So that's really good advice. Thank you for that, Jacqueline. And just to come back to what you said, Mike, as well, because I think that's really, really important. I spoke to a young lady the other day when I was doing some work for Agents Together, and she'd been made redundant, but she had decided to go and get all the materials for ALA, and was putting herself through all of the ALA exams, and in the knowledge that she was going to be a better person when she came out of the back of it, and that she was going to be able to go and apply for jobs once she'd got her exams and everything. And actually, she basically committed herself to developing herself. And I thought, that's fantastic. And we talk about what to do in the downtime. If you do get made redundant, you have a month or a couple of months. If you went and sat in front of any person on this panel and said, well, actually, I had a couple of months off, I did get made redundant, but I've spent all of this time doing X, Y, and Z, learning and improving myself, you'd be impressed, I think, and everybody's nodding. So, Mike, were you going to add something finally to that?
No, I was just going to build on what you said there. So we'll move on a little bit. But there's no doubt that if people did that, particularly if they've got some downtime, it puts them in a better place. It shows initiative. It shows the right attitude. They're improving their knowledge. They may be developing their skills. They're actually going to be a better person than they were. So all of that puts them in the employment arena in a much, much better position.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. Fantastic. Well, I think that'll be that should have answered that question. Hopefully, we talked about that for quite some time. It's good. This should be a relatively quick one. Do I have to put it on my CV if I was made redundant a number of years ago? As in, historically.
You've got to put your start and leave dates on. That's a straightforward thing. You wouldn't necessarily expect someone to put reasons for leaving on their CV necessarily, okay, but you would expect a good interviewer to ask those questions.
Okay.
As everyone said, just you need to be honest.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I knew that'd be a short one, and everybody's nodded, so that's good. That was for Chris, and hopefully that's answered the question. Okay, this next one is a important one, I think, a very important one. This is Alex. My confidence is non-existent after I've lost my job in September. Have you any tips on how I can improve it ready for interviewing? So who wants to take this? Iain, go on. That was quick. That was rapid.
Well, because I think it's really common. We're hearing it all the time in terms of people's confidence get knocked. But I think the first thing would be the topic we talked about before is, if you can and you're financially able, go and find and educate. You get the education to show your next employer that you're serious about your career. I mean, if I was presented with two candidates, one had got off his backside and got themselves qualified in some sort of area and one hadn't, I'm pretty sure which one I know I'd interview first. And there would already be a seed in my mind that they're likely to be the successful candidate. So I'm already germinating an opinion. And the other thing I would do, and I'm not just punting it because we're on here, get onto the agents together team and have a chat with somebody. Being made redundant doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're not good at your job. It doesn't mean that you're not, it just means that you were unlucky on that occasion. It could also be the doorway to the next best thing that could ever happen to you. Most people at some point leave a job, and the one they end up getting is normally better than the one that they left. So I would see it as an opportunity, not as a negative. But if you want to grasp the opportunity, be bothered to do something about it that makes you stand out to the next interview you turn up to.
Okay, that's good. Nicola, yes?
I just wanted to touch on, I think, that you said about confidence and lack of confidence. I think sometimes I know last lockdown for myself, I kind of went a little bit insular. It's quite easy sometimes to not want to pick the phone up and hide a little bit and be a little bit, kind of just keep yourself to yourself. And I think as estate agents, and especially as salespeople, a lot of what we're very good at is being in people's faces and being quite loud and vivacious and bubbly and all those things. And I think when you've had your confidence knocked, those are quite often the things that we notice that we're not very good at. So I know that everybody did these last lockdown, the whole dreaded Zoom quiz, but I have to say there is nothing that's going to make people laugh and bring you out of your shell than being the quiz master on the Zoom quiz. So do something fun, do something that makes you laugh. It doesn't necessarily have to be about confidence, isn't necessarily about confidence at work or confidence in your career, or it can sometimes just be confidence in yourself. And I think sometimes the best way to try and improve your confidence is to make people laugh and to laugh at yourself and just not take things too seriously. So, and also I think the other thing as well is, because I did this too, there's an awful lot of books out there that can really help in terms of helping you to channel your confidence really and learn to become confident. I read quite a few of them during lockdown and they certainly helped me. I can sometimes come across as being very in your face and quite bubbly, but really it's all just a big facade. So, so there you go.
That's really excellent, Nicola. Nicola, would you be able to, not now, but potentially afterwards, could we get some of those book recommendations off you and share them with everybody, everyone on this call, but also all the webinar attendees as well? I think we'll all just have a bit of a confidence boost. Thanks, Nick. Mike, yeah, hi.
Yeah, I was just really going to add to what Iain and Nicola were saying, in so much that I think it's very important that you try and surround yourself with positive people. There will be people that we all know that are detractors and doom and gloom merchants. Well, those are the last people you want to get, in touch. You want to be with people who are up, whether that's a mentor type arrangement through agents together or just your own friends and bits and pieces. I did a blog. It's on the Agents Together website. This isn't a plug for my blog, but there is a blog on there about resilience. And one of the things I did back in my career earlier, we all have successes in our careers, and we all have things that don't go so well. And clearly, obviously, if one sadly ends up on the wrong end of a redundancy situation, that's obviously not going so well. But I've actually got a folder, still got it, with all my successes in it, what I regarded as my successes. Oh yeah, I mean, it's huge, obviously. It's like the British Library. But nevertheless, it started off with testimonial letters from customers and clients saying that I was the best thing since sliced bread. And then it was sort of, you know, some awards I might have won or exams I might have passed, or anything that made me feel good. And actually, it's quite nice, just on occasions, without one's head getting too big, it's quite nice to be able to revisit some of this stuff and tell yourself, actually, I'm all right, I'm okay. And sometimes it needs that with the support of others. And so I think you can develop your own resilience through this sort of stuff. And, you know, the worst thing that can happen is to, as Nicola was saying, is put your head down below the parapet. You know, we need to put our head up above the parapet. Because, you know, if I was down to my last penny or whatever, I'd get out there and go and talk to people. That would be my best way of doing it. It might be hard, but if you hide yourself away, you're probably going to suffer more. So I think, you know, look at what you're good at, build up you know, your success folder, you know, however you do that, and tell yourself you're better, because I think that will be a positive mental attitude is crucial. I
love that. I think that's a great idea. And it's one of those things, I think, as well, if there's any very young people on this webinar, I would urge you to do that, because it's one of the things you get to when you're around about 30 odd and you think, God, why did I not do that? Like, you know, imagine what it would have looked like by now. So the earlier the better with that. But I think any time to put something like that together would be amazing. Yes, Iain.
Just because you mentioned the word young there, I'm actually finding that there's a lot of people at the other end of their career spectrums that have found themselves on the wrong end of redundancy. Yeah, me too. And their confidence is more fragile because they're up against the fact that I'm at the end of my, you know, there's a lawyer on the line, so I'm going to be slightly careful about what I say here, but they may feel and genuinely be prejudiced against because of their age, and their confidence is crucial because young people are robust. You know, they go through ups and downs, but they're generally robust. Generally, I appreciate there are exceptions to the rule, but I've found myself becoming an agony aunt to a lot of people, old colleagues, or people that have found themselves on the wrong end of redundancy, or even losing their job for other reasons. And it's very important that they have people to you know, they feel a lack of pride. They feel a pride problem in asking for help, and they shouldn't. You know, it's okay. You know, I have time. I've got 3 or 4 people that when I'm not feeling quite confident or sure-footed, I've got those 3 or 4 people that I can speak to. They'll wrap me around the head. They'll bring me back up, and bang, it works. But so I just want to say to all the people that are at that end of their age group, that talk to somebody, pick up the phone. You'll soon get up quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a mentor session with somebody the other day who had been made redundant after 27 years in a role, and they were flawed. It is they were absolutely flawed, and all of the loyalty and everything that they'd done, and I worked with them and to try to unpick that and get the positives out of it and look at what could happen next. But you're absolutely right, Iain, and I think, yeah, it's a difficult thing to overcome. So your confidence is going to take a knock, but positive people, remembering and reminding yourself of everything that you've done, and really getting into that mindset. Absolutely great. Mike, did you have something to add? Oh, we've got
just very quickly, was to say that if you do unfortunately find yourself without that purpose of going to work every day and whatever else, what is really also crucial is having some sort of structure to what you're doing every day. You know, now, you know, different people will have different things, whether that's job seeking, whether that's education, what volunteering, you know, whatever it might be, but having some sort of structure and purpose, going and playing a round of golf, whatever it is crucial, because otherwise, you know, you're going to sit and wallow in whatever the circumstances are, you won't start to see the wood from the trees. And then it becomes perhaps harder and harder to break out of that. So I think keeping that structure, talking to people, as Iain said, those sort of things are also absolutely vital. As I say, you've got to come out fighting almost.
Great. Jacqueline?
Yeah, what I was going to add to that as well is that obviously I don't think the legal process helps with knocking that confidence when we get to the selection criteria that I was talking about, because obviously people then being picked off against each other, they may see that as ostensibly they're being told that they're not better than their fellow colleague, and that whole selection criteria process. So that can inevitably knock confidence. But I think people just need to know that it's a process, and it's a process that has to be followed. And ultimately, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be good for another similar role of that kind. So yeah, I think, even being a lawyer, I think that, in this circumstance, that's where the this legal process can be guilty of knocking someone's confidence. But I also have a great story of someone who's 63, who had been working for his company for 34 years and has been made redundant, and he got a job virtually straight away. In actual fact, he had 2 or 3 job offers, but he was quite confident in himself and just applied for lots of roles. So yeah, I totally agree with everything the panel said.
Fantastic. Stuart?
Sorry.
It's all right. This is great. This is fantastic.
No, absolutely. Some really great advice from my colleagues there. I guess the other thing as well in terms of confidence is it does come as a big shock when you get made redundant, especially if you've been with the company a long time and all the things people have said. One thing that really doesn't help already shattered confidence is applying for that first job and maybe not even getting a response from an employer, or getting a rejection email, rejection letter. That can really kind of exaggerate the feeling of disappointment and stress and uncertainty. So what I would just say, and again, I think we've all offered our help previously, is if you have been made redundant, you've applied for your first job, you've not had a response, or you've been rejected, and you're feeling pretty low and confused, is ask for some help. Ask for, whether it's us, a friend, family, anybody you know, to look at your CV and just give you some tips and advice on how it reads, because you might have been in the same company for many years, you might not have written a CV before, you might not have had an interview before, you might not have needed one, especially in this industry where people tend to move around quite easily in good times. So I'd say get some advice as quickly as you can on your CV, on your LinkedIn profile, because as soon as you then make an application and you get invited to an interview, it will give you a real boost. It's a great thing to build from.
Absolutely. And everything, it's easy for me to sit here and say this, but there's so much to learn from those times when you feel like you haven't quite achieved what you wanted to achieve. So, if you didn't get through to interview, just seek out the reason why, so that you can learn from it and move forward all the time if you can. Okay, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, there's just so much great advice there. I am going to just move on because we've got a few more questions to get through in the next sort of 15-20 minutes. So the next question, Josh, I'm going to fire this one at you, and also you, Russell. What skills are hiring estate agents looking for now? What is it? What's going to make me sing? And that question has come from Joe.
I think it's an interesting question. It depends on the role, doesn't it? I think lots of people want fee earners that can add financial value to their business's bottom line. We've seen a massive spike in financial services. So lots of people wanting CMAP qualified brokers. So again, it's knowing your market, isn't it? And knowing the local area and who's recruiting at what level and what qualifications and skill sets you need to make sure that you're the one that gets the interview, that gets the job offer. So I would say generically across estate agency and lettings, they want someone with 2 years plus experience. They want someone they can plug in, that can generate revenue straight away, and typically that can value. And I don't know if Russell agrees with me on that bit.
Yeah, I do, Josh. I think being accurate with your figures as well. One of my pet hates, I think I picked up on this last time, Sarah, is when people go for interviews, they try to sometimes make themselves look better than they are, and then the hiring manager, me in the past, I would go and check and you can check, we all know how you can go and check people's market share, conversion rates. And sometimes when they go for a busier office, people sort of embellish their figures to make them look like they can cope with that office, when it's the complete wrong thing to do. You should be honest with your figures. I think Michael picked up on it earlier. People, if you're honest, it goes massively in your favor. If you try to embellish it, it actually, for me, turns me off completely. Is if they can lie about something about figures, then how can I trust them when something happens within my organization? So yeah, just because you work in a smaller office, a satellite office, or you work for a bigger company, just be honest with your figures. Because that doesn't mean you're the finished article at that. If you've got, I think Josh picked up on 2 years experience. If you've got 2 years experience, great. If you've got 3 years, 4 years, or 1 year, people know you will grow into that role or get better working with their training. So I think we've all picked up on the training side of it, bettering yourself, but just be honest and be accurate with your figures. Because I've had a few instances recently we have as a company that have definitely not been like that. Okay. So yeah, be accurate with your figures.
Accurate and honest, and that ability to be a fee earner, and but what if you're not that? I mean, what if you are a really good negotiator who has found themselves redundant, and and I've only been doing it a year, maybe. I'm not saying that this is what Joe is, but it's quite easy for us to sit here and say, well, you've got to have 2 years plus, but how can we give hope to the people who've got less than 2 years experience? I can't tell whether is that you, Iain? Are you waving at me?
I did put me up, yeah. I think Mike did as well, but yes, we both did.
Go on, Iain.
Well, I just want to endorse the honesty thing, but I want to go I'm slightly different in what we're seeing. So we're not, the people we're working with on the recruitment side, the employers, are coming more away from the experience and more towards capabilities. So because they've reimagined the way they run their business, the roles that they're trying to fill are different from what they were pre-COVID. So they need different skills. So we are definitely seeing, I mean, okay, there are very specific roles like sales progression or property manager in lettings where you probably have to have some experience. You can't just jettison into them. But the other roles that are sort of being reimagined and are coming in, we're actually finding that they're specifically not wanting estate agents that come with the previous set of rules and regulations around how a estate agency should be. They actually want anything but that. They want a very different type of person. So I think there should be light at the end of tunnel for everybody, because if you're experienced, there are some roles that you can do. If you're not experienced, but you show the right attributes through your CV and through the way you conduct the interview, plenty of opportunity, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you do hear a lot on various different channels and books that you read about hiring on attitude, not necessarily on experience, and that is absolutely something that I personally subscribe to, because I think you can train people, and if they're trainable, as long as you're willing to invest in that person, you can pretty much help them to become whatever they and you want them to become. But if they are set in their ways and they don't have that right attitude towards the growth and the development and the learning, then it becomes quite difficult to hire those people, because you have to accept that whatever their way is their way. And if it's a good way, that's good, but it's kind of one-dimensional. And I was reading an article the other day about how generalists, people who are generalists, are becoming more in demand now than specialists, largely because this is the world that we live in now. There's just so much more going on all the time, and being agile and being flexible to the surroundings, the environment that you find yourself in is hugely important. So it'd be interesting to see. Mike, did you want to summarize?
Oh, it was really just almost what you were saying. People have always recruited, in my view, on attitude, knowledge, and skills, and by a million miles, attitude is where it's at. Because if they've got the right attitude, provided they've got enough between their ears to take things on board, people can develop the knowledge and the skills. When you're interviewing, you can test knowledge. You can obviously, through questioning and everything, you can ascertain attitude. And we were saying about people doing things to try and improve themselves and whatever, you could demonstrate that. It's much more difficult to judge skills through an interview. process, because that's how they actually apply their knowledge with their attitude. So in terms of, if I was looking for a job, you know, the key areas are really going to be an element of knowledge, and obviously from experience, but it's really the attitude one. And that's why, you know, that's why people have got to put themselves in that frame of mind before they go forward, in my view.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Well, thank you all for that. Hopefully that will answer Joe's question. Okay, next one. This is from Mark. Okay, so this is an interesting one because I actually, you know, I did this. So I've been an agent for 5 years. Is it worth looking at jobs with suppliers? Will they consider me even though I have no experience in that supplier market? Are there any tips on how I can sell myself to these type of employers? So this could be a can of worms. This might take us right through to the end of the call, but we have got 2 more questions after this. Stuart, you seem like the perfect person to answer this. I'm not going to go quite into would you hire an estate agent, but it's you know, I did it myself. I was an estate agent for years, and then I was poacher term gatekeeper when I went to Fine and Country in the Guild, and it was the best thing for me that I ever did. But what would your sort of message on doing that with suppliers? What would your message to Mark be?
I think the first thing to do is again, look at an advert, or if there's a job description, look at the person specification and try and draw out what the key kind of generic skills are. If you're moving out of your own industry sector, then there should be a lot of transferable things, and whether that's, you know, negotiation skills, whether it's sales, whether it's project management, change management, whatever the core aspects of that job are. If you're doing that already, then there's absolutely no issue at all in applying to a different industry sector. Because then you've got transferable skills and you can give examples of how you've used those to be successful. And I think in this market, as we've said for the last sort of hour or so, it's a tough market. You know, there are a lot of redundancies. There are definitely jobs out there, and I think, you know, it would be mad not to look at anything ultimately that can use your skill set. And as everyone has just said in the last 5 minutes about attitude, if you can get yourself to an interview stage and you've got the right positive attitude, and you give some great examples of, you know, how you've used your skills and your willingness to learn in a different industry, and you can be honest and say, look, you know, I haven't worked in this industry before, but I'm really confident that I can bring usable skills, transferable skills, and I'm willing to learn, and I know I can be successful with some support, then it's definitely worth a go.
Fantastic. Yeah, I really agree with that. Yes, Jacqueline. Yeah.
So just from an employment law point of view as well, if you are going to work for a supplier, just look at your existing employment contract and make sure that there's nothing in it that prevents you, like a restricted covenant, that prevents you from going to work for a supplier. That's not that common. It's usually just that you can't go and work for a client or a customer for a while. So it doesn't usually extend as far as a supply, but I have seen it. So just be aware of that.
That's brilliant advice. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, before you go handing your notice in and disappearing, you know, that was a slightly different one because it wasn't redundancy, but yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. We just have 2 questions left, so I'm going to keep going so that we can hopefully finish on time. We have no other live questions at the moment. Right. So we talked about LinkedIn last week. So this is actually from Mohammed. What sort of posts should I be doing on my LinkedIn to attract employers? Interesting. Mike Day's laughing. It always makes me nervous when Mike Day starts giggling away to himself. Who wants to take this? I've lost track of who's spoken the most, so I'm going to let you guys tell me. Josh, you've been very quiet today. You all right?
All right, just, you know, suffering of COVID. No, not really. LinkedIn. So all the stuff we just mentioned, really. So we talked about attitude. We talked about going the extra mile to learn some more skills. I'll be pushing out posts like that. So I've just signed up for ARA or just signed up for the Roper scheme, whatever it may be. Shout about the stuff you're doing because people will notice that and people will pick up on that. So all the stuff that Mike was saying, in particular around go and invest in yourself and don't just sit on your backside. Shout about the stuff you're doing because it will be picked up by potential employers. So share your success and what you've been up to, why you're being made redundant, I would definitely do that.
Russell, yeah, thank you, Josh.
Yeah, just following on from what Josh said, I've seen some really good posts, as in positivity, but I've also seen some candidates being quite negative, which I think you have to be very careful if you're being negative, because if I was an employer and I checked someone out on social media and I saw them being quite negative about certain companies that I'd been interviewing with, I would be concerned by the way they conduct themselves if I was going to hire them. So yeah, negativity for me is not a LinkedIn platform. I believe you should be positive, because I think employers will look at social media to see what sort of person they are. So yeah, my view is, yeah, negativity I wouldn't put on social media.
I'm so glad you raised that, Russell, because so often I do wonder that, you know, debate is good, constructive conflict is healthy, it creates innovation, but the attack on individuals or businesses, it just does not reflect well on the individual that is doing it. I couldn't agree more, and I'm so glad that you raised that, so thank you. Iain, did I see your hand pop up? I think you're in competition with Mike Day again. Mike Day, do you want to go first this time?
Okay, just very quickly, I agree about the positivity. Don't go on there if you've had a drink inside you, you know, all of that sort of, you know, obvious stuff. But you don't have to be posting yourself. You can go in and comment on other material, but do so in a constructive way, as opposed to, you know, don't become one of the property industry haters, you know, who have got nothing better to do than basically be negative about everything that's happening. Now, they tend to do it anonymously, but nevertheless, you know, if you knew who they were, you wouldn't employ them. So I think that is absolutely crucial. But what a fantastic way, if you're putting constructive information or comment or whatever out there. You know, I'm sure the same's with Iain. I get a lot of my business from LinkedIn, from people that I've never known, but they've seen me in some way, shape or form commenting or whatever, you know, on LinkedIn, and therefore they think I know something about what I'm talking about. And you can fool all of the people some of the time.
Yeah.
No, I didn't mean that, but you you know, it is a great way of reaching people.
Perfect. Okay, Jacqueline, I'll come to you 1 second. Iain, did you have anything to add? Sorry, I just...
Yeah, I'm not an expert in personal branding, but I think obviously any posts you put out there need to be genuine and you know, getting across you. But the bit that Russell mentioned, I just wanted to endorse that. I know people that have failed to secure a post when they were about to get the job offer because somebody spotted that they were, in most cases where I've seen the negativity, they're actually being negative about the last post or the last team that they worked with, maybe slagging off the process, the redundancy process or the selection process. And all you're telling the future employer is, I've just got a political minefield. I've got somebody that's always going to be, you're just creating a problem for yourself. So just think twice before you post it. And if you have posted it, just go and delete them. We all post things that we shouldn't, but just go and delete it.
Never been truer. Thanks for that, Iain. Never been truer as well. Now, there's a lot, obviously, to talk about outside of work, i.e. politics, coronavirus, all of the divisive topics that we seem to have on our current, like, sort of view of the day. And I'm not suggesting that freedom of speech shouldn't be a thing, because we were absolutely free to say whatever we want, aren't we? But ultimately, you have to remember that people will judge you on what you're saying there. So consider that before you press that post button. Jacqueline, yes, please.
Yeah, all I was going to say is I know a lot of agency firms have their IT and communications and social media policies now anyway. So once again, just before you post anything, if you're in employment, just be mindful of what that policy says and what the employer wants you to do, or if you've left, equally still be mindful of that policy and what you've committed to. And often what I do know is that often people keep themselves on LinkedIn as being employed somewhere when their employment's over. and obviously that's not great, because you can't hold yourself out to be an employee of someone that that you're no longer employed by. So it's all of those things, really. Just be mindful of those things.
Perfect, thank you. We have one last question. It is 1 minute to 2, so we'll literally do this and then we'll be done. And possibly, Jacqueline, it's back to you, but I'd love to know, it's an interesting one. This has come from Claire. Can you decline redundancy on any grounds? So basically, is there any way I can keep my job, she says? So
redundancy is potentially a fair reason for terminating someone's employment. So you can't say, it's not like you can go back and say, no, I'm not being made redundant, and that would be that. As long as they can tick those 4 boxes that I was talking about earlier, then yeah, you can't do that.
That's fine. I thought that might be the case, which is, I get it. I mean, what a shame, because obviously Claire really wants to keep her job, and that's you know.
Yeah, then it's probably going back to what we talked about earlier, coming up with some real positive and confident ideas about alternatives, really.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there are jobs out there. We've talked about it. You've got all of some of the best recruiters, all of the best recruiters in the industry on here, and they're saying there are jobs available. So that's great, and it's about getting through that. That is the end of the questions that we've had submitted. We are literally 1 minute over time, which is absolutely unbelievable that I've managed to just about bring it in on time again. This will go down in history, no doubt. Thank you to everybody who's joined us on the webinar. Thank you to everybody who is joining on the recorded version. But most of all, I can't stress this enough, the wonderful people that we all see before us here on this screen have given their time once again to help people in the industry for free with no gain. So I am, and all of us at Agents Together are truly, truly grateful to all of you for everything that you're doing for Agents Together and all the people in the industry. So thank you so much. If anybody who's on the webinar would like any assistance from these wonderful people, just drop us an email at mentorships@agentstogether.co.uk, and the very wonderful Samuel Offley will connect you with these great people, and we can help you out if that's what you need. But thank you for joining us, and thank you, experts, for being part of this wonderful panel and giving some great advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.